or capitalism, publishing his personal philosophy in a 3-volume green book. Gadhafi always said that his goal was to change the world, but it was the way he set out to do it that amused, confused, and often infuriated. Gadhafi said he wanted to unite the Arab world and even proclaimed a merger with Libya, Egypt, and Syria in 1972. That merger plan fell apart. A later merger attempt with Tunisia disintegrated into bitter animosity. Maintaining a colorful profile wherever he went, he made a point of emphasizing his Bedouin roots, sleeping in tents, protected by an eye-catching female security detail. His speeches were legendary for both length and bombast. This 2009 speech at the UN was typical.
We are not committed to obey the rules or the resolutions of the Security Councils, which in this formation, because it is undemocratic and just.
What was supposed to be a 15-minute talk
to be a member of the Security Councils and to
rambled on more than 90 minutes.
Orders given by the Security Councils.
But while he sometimes appeared a clown on the world stage, his actions were often deadly. In the mid-'80s, he funneled money and weapons to support the Palestine Liberation Organization's fight against Israel, the Irish Republican Army's efforts to defeat British rule in Northern Ireland. And he viciously targeted Americans. In 1986, Libyan agents were accused of bombing a Berlin nightclub, killing 2 Americans and a Turk. U.S. President Ronald Reagan responded by bombing Tripoli, targeting Gadhafi's house. The raid killed more than 100 people, including Gadhafi's own daughter. 2 years later, Pan Am Flight 103 blew up over the tiny village of Lockerbie, Scotland, raining debris and taking 270 lives. Investigators traced the attack to Libya. When Libya refused to turn over the suspects, the UN imposed tough sanctions, leaving the country isolated and increasingly destitute. After 11 years as an international outcast, Gadhafi cut a deal. He gave up the Lockerbie bombing suspects for trial, and after the U.S. invaded Iraq, he surprised the world by agreeing to destroy all of his chemical, nuclear, and biological weapons. Gadhafi soon welcomed Western oil companies like BP and Total into Libya, but questions lingered about
The U.S. has welcomed news of a rebel advance in Libya. The British Prime Minister also commenting. Here's David Cameron.
Although fighting continues, and some of it is extremely fierce. We have no confirmation of Gadhafi's whereabouts, but at least 2 of Gadhafi's sons have been detained. His regime is falling apart and is in full retreat. Gadhafi must stop fighting without conditions and clearly show that he has given up any claim to control Libya. As for his future, that should be a decision for Chairman Jalil and the new Libyan authorities. The situation in Tripoli is clearly very fluid, and there is absolutely no room for complacency. Our task now is to do all we can to support the will of the Libyan people, which is for an effective transition to a free, democratic, and inclusive Libya. This will be, and must be, and should be, Libyan-led and a Libyan-owned process with broad international support coordinated by the United Nations. I'm in close contact with partners from NATO, the Arab League, and Chairman Jalil himself. Clearly, the immediate priority today is to establish security in Tripoli. We are working closely with the NTC to support their plans to make sure that happens. I spoke to Chairman Jalil last week and will be speaking to him again today to agree with him the importance of respecting human rights, avoiding reprisals, and making sure that all parts of Libya can share in the future of that country. And the wider NATO mission, which is to protect civilians, that will continue for as long as it is needed. This morning, the National Security Council also discussed the work that needs to be done on medical supplies and humanitarian aid, on diplomatic efforts, and on our work at the UN Security Council. Let me say a word about each. First, on the need to support the medical facilities in Tripoli. We've already deployed medical supplies close to where they're needed and have now released them to the World Health Organization. In the coming days, it will be important to make sure that the communications networks, the electricity, the power supplies, fuel and water are maintained or repaired where they need to be. The National Transitional Council have been planning for this for months, and we have been helping with that work. Diplomatically, we have a strong mission already in Benghazi, consisting of Foreign Office, military and aid specialists, and we will establish a British diplomatic presence in Tripoli as soon as it is safe to do so. This will include stabilisation experts who've been planning for this moment with the NTC for months. At the United Nations, we will also be taking early action in the Security Council to give the new Libyan authorities the legal, diplomatic, political and financial support they require. We will soon be able to release the frozen assets that belong to the Libyan people. The Foreign Secretary is returning to the UK, and with the Deputy Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary and the Development Secretary, they will coordinate our efforts with the NTC in the weeks ahead. 6 months ago, this country took the difficult decision to commit our military to support the people of Libya. I said at the time that the action was necessary, legal and right, and I believe that even more strongly today. It was necessary because Gadhafi was going to slaughter his own people, and that massacre of innocent people was prevented. It was legal because we secured a resolution from the United Nations, and we have been acting in accordance with that resolution ever since. And it was right because the Libyan people deserve to shape their own future, just as the people of Egypt and Tunisia are now doing. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the many British pilots, air staff, ground crew and everyone who has worked so hard to support the NATO mission and the work of the NTC. Our forces, as ever, showed incredible bravery, great professionalism and dedication. This has not been our revolution, but we can be proud that we have played our part. There will undoubtedly be difficult days ahead. No transition is ever smooth or easy. But today, the Arab Spring is a step further away from oppression and dictatorship and a step closer to freedom and democracy. And the Libyan people are closer to their dream of a better future, free from the terror of Gadhafi. Thank you. Happy to take some questions. Sky News.
Prime Minister John Craig from Sky News. You've always said throughout this 6 months that Gadhafi must go. Now you're just saying his future is up to the new Libyan authorities. Now, the question is, go where? A few weeks ago, Mr Hague seemed to change the British government's position from he must leave Libya to perhaps he could stay in Libya. Now, accepting what you've said about it's up to the Libyans, but what is your position about what should happen to Gadhafi? Should he leave Libya? Should he be put on trial in Libya? What are you advocating?
I would like to see Colonel Gadhafi face justice for his crimes. He has committed appalling crimes against his own people. But Libya is a sovereign country. It is a matter for the new authorities in Libya to do what they believe is right with Gadhafi. First, obviously, they have to find him. We don't know where Gadhafi is. We don't know whether he's still in Libya. And clearly this is going to be some time before we are fully aware of that. ITV.
Prime Minister Lucy Manning from ITV News. You were the
regime is falling apart. It is in full retreat. The British Prime Minister David Cameron speaking, saying Muammar Gadhafi needs to stop fighting with no conditions. He also says that they have no confirmation as to where exactly Muammar Gadhafi even is. We don't know his whereabouts, he says. The Prime Minister also added that the UK will support the will of the Libyan people to transfer and transition power in the country in a peaceful and democratic way. He also said the priority was to establish security in Tripoli, insisting too that the rebels themselves have to respect human rights and make sure that there are no bloody reprisals. Well, the U.S. has also welcomed news of rebel advances in Libya. President Barack Obama has urged Muammar Gadhafi to relinquish power once and for all. The president's being briefed on the latest events while he's on vacation at Martha's Vineyard. That's in Massachusetts. CNN's Dan Lothian is there, and he joins us now. Dan, what's the White House saying right now?
Well, we know that President Obama is expected to have his first briefing of the day sometime this morning on the situation in Libya. His counterterrorism advisor, John Brennan, has been here throughout the 10-day vacation. In addition to that, President Obama has also conducted a high-level conference call with senior members of his national security team, including his chief of staff, the Secretary of Defense, his national security advisor, and several others. I think what's unclear at this point is whether or not we'll hear from the president today outside of some sort of written statement, perhaps on camera. That's unclear at this point. What the White House has been careful to do is to not get the president out in front of any of the developments on the ground. What we did hear from the president overnight was a statement on the situation in Libya, where the president said in part, quote, "The people of Libya are showing that the universal pursuit of dignity and freedom is far stronger than the iron fist of a dictator." Now the big question is what happens next, as the U.S. has been squarely behind the rebel movement there in Libya. One senior administration official talking to my colleague Jill Daugherty was asked about the TNC and how they've been handling the situation so far on the ground, and that official telling my colleague, quote, "News reports from Tripoli are encouraging. So far, people avoiding retribution." That has been a big concern of this administration, and that is something that they will be watching closely over the next few hours. Zane?
CNN's White House correspondent Dan Lothian reporting. Well, people in the rest of the Arab world are watching closely as the news comes out of Libya, bringing joy for some and some real anxiety for others. Robin Wright is an Arab affairs analyst and the author of a number of books on the Middle East, including her latest, Rock the Kasbah. She joins us now from Washington. Hi, Robin. Good to see you. How is this moment playing out in the Arab world?
Well, I think this is the beginning of what we might call phase 2 in the Arab uprisings. It comes together at the same time that the international community has called for the ouster of President Assad in Syria, and a critical moment for President Saleh in Yemen. The process of change has been stalled really since March because of the very difficult circumstances on the ground and the determination of the three leaders in Syria, Yemen, and Libya to use whatever force necessary to try to put down the rebellions. But Gadhafi's ouster will clearly mark some movement and show that all of these men will continue to be vulnerable, and that no use of force can repress the kind of street movement that is now sweeping through an important country like Libya.
Once the euphoria of a street movement wears out and the practicalities of running a country kicks in, that's going to be the real test too now, isn't it? Are the rebels really capable of running Libya, or do they need help?
They're going to need an enormous amount of help. They're going to need access to many of the frozen assets of Gadhafi. They're going to need help from the international community in reconstruction. But Libya, of the 22 Arab countries, is the one country that actually has a prospect of transformation in the not-too-distant future. It is a small population, 6.5 million people. It has enormous oil resources. And when it comes to reconstruction, we're talking about a limited number of places cities along the northern coast with the Mediterranean. And so this is something that's possible, unlike a place like Egypt that has 85 million people, no real oil, and has to basically not only reconstruct politically but economically too. Libya has a lot more going for it.
Is this moment that we are seeing unfold in Tripoli today going to inspire Syrian opposition and people out on the streets again, and other people around the Arab world?
I think there's a kind of adrenaline that gets jump-started by both what's been happening in Syria over the past 10 days, with the international community taking a strong stand, with the people on the street showing that they are not going to succumb even to the use of gunboats by the Syrian regime, the fact that the rebels have moved so quickly in taking Tripoli, really far faster than anyone anticipated, will also spur people in other countries. And I think this, this is a process that we may also see play out, bubble up in other countries now as well.
Robin Wright, an Arab affairs analyst and the author of the new book, Rock the Kasbah, speaking to us from Washington. Thanks a lot, Robin.
Thank you,
The
Zane.
financial market